Check her shoes. Look in the vacuum cleaner bag. These people know all the tricks for hiding stolen goods. Victoria Whitmore's venomous accusations echoed through her mansion as police searched every inch of her black maid's belongings. But what Victoria didn't realize was that the woman she was trying to destroy held a secret so shocking it would expose the real criminal and turn her perfect world upside down. When priceless jewelry vanishes from a wealthy socialite's bedroom, all fingers point to the quiet domestic worker who had access to everything. However, as investigators dig deeper into this seemingly open and shut case, they uncover a web of deception, fraud, and desperate schemes that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about guilt, innocence, and the dangerous power of assumptions. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Amelia Washington adjusted the imported silk curtains with the same meticulous care she brought to every task in the Whitmore mansion. At 45, she moved through the opulent rooms with practiced grace, her movements reflecting years of discipline that once commanded university lecture halls, now serving in these marble corridors lined with priceless art. Amelia. Victoria Whitmore's voice sliced through the afternoon tranquility like a razor. Those crystal glasses better be spotless for tonight's charity gala. I refuse to have my guests questioning the competence of my household staff. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore, Amelia replied, her voice steady and professional. She had learned to swallow her pride daily, focusing instead on the paycheck that kept her modest apartment and helped cover her elderly mother's mounting medical expenses. Victoria swept into the dining room wearing a designer gown that cost more than most people earned in 6 months. Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the afternoon light streaming through the French windows. And make absolutely certain you remain in the kitchen during the entire event. I don't want you mingling inappropriately with my distinguished guests. Amelia nodded silently, watching Victoria's reflection in the polished mahogany table. If this woman only realized she was addressing someone who had once lectured to packed auditoriums about Renaissance art, who had been featured in Art History Quarterly for her groundbreaking research on medieval jewelry authentication techniques, who had advised museums on million-dollar acquisitions. These pieces have been treasured in my family for generations, Victoria continued, touching her pearl necklace with obvious satisfaction. Real quality, genuine craftsmanship, unlike the cheap reproductions flooding the market today. The bitter irony wasn't lost on Amelia, who immediately recognized several of Victoria's family heirlooms as modern reproductions that she could authenticate as fakes within minutes. The setting techniques, the metal composition, even the wear patterns screamed contemporary manufacture. But commenting would mean revealing expertise that didn't align with Victoria's narrow perception of who domestic workers were supposed to be. The peaceful afternoon routine shattered completely when Victoria's piercing scream echoed throughout the mansion's elegant corridors. Robbery. Theft. Someone has stolen from me. Amelia dropped her cleaning supplies and rushed toward the sound, her heart pounding with dread. She found Victoria in the master bedroom, frantically searching through her jewelry armoire like a woman possessed. Precious pieces lay scattered across the antique Persian rug like fallen stars, their settings catching light from the crystal chandelier overhead. My grandmother's emerald brooch. The ruby pendant David brought me from Paris. The sapphire earrings. Victoria's face contorted with rage and disbelief as her wild eyes locked onto Amelia with venomous accusation. You were the only person in my private bedroom today. Mrs. Whitmore, I would never touch your personal belongings. I only dusted around the dresser and, don't you dare lie to my face. Victoria's voice rose to a hysterical shriek that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. You're the only one with access to my most private spaces. You've been planning this theft for months. The accusation hung in the perfumed air like deadly poison, its racist implications crystal clear and absolutely devastating to witness. The Whitmore estate transformed into a crime scene within 90 minutes, police vehicles lining the circular cobblestone driveway while Detective James Rivera surveyed the chaos with the methodical precision of 25 years in law enforcement. Victoria performed her victimhood like a seasoned actress commanding center stage. Detective Rivera, I've been violated in the most despicable, unthinkable way possible. Victoria pressed her manicured hand dramatically against her chest. Betrayed by someone I trusted completely, someone I showed genuine Christian charity by employing despite her obvious limitations and background. Rivera's experienced eyes flicked toward Amelia, who maintained remarkable composure despite the hurricane of accusations swirling around her. Something about this woman's bearing struck him as distinctly unusual, not the desperate, frantic denials typical of guilty parties, but rather the quiet, dignified strength of someone long accustomed to weathering life's most brutal storms. We'll need to conduct a comprehensive search of all premises, ma'am, Rivera informed Victoria with professional courtesy. Beginning with Mrs. Washington's personal belongings and extending to her vehicle and residence. Search absolutely everything, Victoria declared with vindictive triumph blazing in her eyes. Her purse, her coat pockets, that pathetic little apartment she rents downtown. I want every single inch thoroughly examined for my stolen property. The methodical search commenced with clinical precision. Officers examined Amelia's modest leather handbag, her worn winter coat, even the simple brown bag lunch she'd carefully prepared that morning. Victoria circled like a predatory vulture, her commentary growing increasingly vicious and personal with each empty pocket discovered. Check inside her shoes. Look through the vacuum cleaner bag. Search the car's glove compartment. These people are incredibly clever about concealing stolen merchandise in unexpected places. Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Rivera's voice carried sharp warning, please maintain distance and allow my officers to conduct their investigation properly. But Victoria was completely intoxicated by her perceived moral superiority and righteous indignation. I provided that woman with opportunities nobody else would ever offer. I treated her practically like extended family, and this is precisely how she chooses to repay my extraordinary generosity and kindness. Officer Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed rookie detective with keen observational skills, carefully noted Amelia's subtle reaction to Victoria's outrageous claims. A brief flash of something powerful, pain, deep indignation, perhaps even profound pity, crossed the accused woman's dignified features before she masterfully regained her composed exterior. The thorough search of Amelia's modest downtown apartment yielded absolutely nothing suspicious or incriminating. No hidden jewelry stashed away, no unexplained expensive purchases, no evidence whatsoever beyond Victoria's inflammatory accusations. However, the psychological damage was already complete and irreversible. Curious neighbors gathered along the sidewalk, whispering among themselves and pointing accusingly as officers emerged carrying completely empty evidence bags. This proves absolutely nothing, Victoria declared when investigators returned empty-handed to the mansion. She's obviously hidden everything somewhere else entirely. Probably maintains accomplices, an entire organized network of professional criminals and thieves. Rivera observed how Amelia's spine straightened noticeably at this fresh, devastating insult, catching a glimpse of pure steel beneath her carefully maintained quiet exterior. Mrs. Washington, we require you to accompany us to the station for formal questioning, Rivera stated, his tone remaining respectful despite the circumstances. As they prepared for departure, Victoria called out with barely contained vicious satisfaction, I sincerely hope they prosecute you to the fullest extent. People exactly like you need to learn there are serious consequences for stealing from your obvious betters. The police station's sterile interrogation room felt suffocating despite its deliberately bland, institutional neutrality. Amelia sat perfectly straight across from Detective Rivera and Officer Chen, her hands folded with practiced calm in her lap despite the emotional hurricane raging within her wounded heart. Please walk us through your typical daily routine at the Whitmore residence, Rivera began with professional courtesy. I arrive promptly at 7:30 each morning, prepare breakfast when specifically requested, handle all laundry and pressing needs, thoroughly clean the main living areas, organize Mrs. Whitmore's social calendar when needed, and assist with any special event preparations, Amelia recited with mechanical precision. I've maintained employment with the family for exactly 18 months. Chen leaned forward across the metal table, studying Amelia with intense scrutiny. That represents incredibly significant access to extremely valuable personal items throughout the house. During your employment, did you ever feel tempted by the expensive things you encountered daily? Amelia's laugh carried soft bitterness that seemed to echo off the concrete walls. Officer, if I genuinely wanted to steal from Mrs. Whitmore, I certainly wouldn't choose the most obvious, easily traceable pieces in her entire collection. I would carefully select something subtle and understated, something that wouldn't be discovered missing for weeks or possibly months. The response demonstrated such intelligent strategic thinking that both seasoned officers exchanged meaningful, surprised glances across the table. Why do you believe Mrs. Whitmore would specifically accuse you of this theft? Rivera pressed, his detective instinct sensing deeper currents beneath the surface. Amelia remained silent for several long moments, her distant eyes reflecting years of accumulated pain and disappointment. Because I represent convenience, detective. I'm simply the hired help, easily replaceable and conveniently blamable. Because pointing accusations at someone like me proves much simpler than seriously examining other uncomfortable possibilities. When you say someone like you, what exactly do you mean? A black woman who cleans wealthy people's houses for basic survival, Amelia replied with quiet dignity. Someone Mrs. Whitmore automatically sees as completely disposable and unworthy of consideration. As the intensive questioning continued methodically, Chen began carefully noting significant inconsistencies in the established timeline. Mrs. Whitmore initially claimed she discovered the theft at exactly 4 p.m., but her own detailed schedule clearly shows multiple trips to her private bedroom throughout the entire day. When did she actually last see these specific pieces? I honestly cannot say with any certainty, Amelia admitted with complete transparency. She changes jewelry frequently depending on her activities and mood. I dust her dresser surfaces twice weekly during regular cleaning, but I absolutely don't maintain any catalog or inventory of her personal collection. Meanwhile, Rebecca Martinez, the Whitmores' immediate next-door neighbor, watched the unfolding police activity with steadily growing concern and unease. She had observed Amelia Washington countless times over many months, always a dignified, soft-spoken woman who consistently offered genuine, warm smiles and friendly waves. The notion of her as any sort of thief seemed not just unlikely, but completely impossible to believe. Excuse me, officer, Rebecca approached Chen outside the station with obvious urgency. I absolutely must tell you about something extremely strange and suspicious I witnessed yesterday at the Whitmore property that's been bothering me. Chen's attention immediately sharpened with professional interest. What exactly did you observe, ma'am? A tall man I didn't recognize leaving through their back garden gate around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He seemed to be moving very quickly and furtively, almost like he was deliberately trying to avoid being seen by anyone. Back inside the sterile interrogation room, Rivera was steadily discovering complex layers to Amelia's personal story that completely contradicted the profile of a desperate, opportunistic thief. Your employment references are absolutely exceptional across the board, he observed with growing puzzlement. Every single former employer describes you as completely honest, remarkably intelligent, and surprisingly knowledgeable about fine art and valuable antiques. Amelia's carefully maintained composure finally wavered slightly, revealing glimpses of profound loss beneath her dignified exterior. I lived a completely different life once, detective. Before devastating personal circumstances forced me to abandon everything and start over from nothing. The crushing weight of her dramatic fall from academic grace to criminal accusation hung heavily in the sterile room, representing a heartbreaking story of human dignity somehow maintained despite absolutely devastating personal loss and societal prejudice. Officer Sarah Chen returned to the imposing Whitmore mansion the following morning with sharpened focus and renewed determination, her investigative instincts screaming that this seemingly straightforward case contained dangerous complexities deliberately hidden beneath its polished surface. Eleanor Whitmore, Victoria's 78-year-old mother-in-law, answered the ornate front door with a knowing, almost conspiratorial smile. Back again so soon, dear. I suppose Victoria is upstairs having another one of her increasingly frequent dramatic episodes. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask some detailed questions about recent visitors to your home, Chen said, pulling out her leather notebook with professional efficiency. Eleanor's intelligent blue eyes sparkled with sharp awareness accumulated over decades of observing human nature. "Ah, you're referring to Marcus Thompson, aren't you? Victoria's new so-called business associate who's been practically living here whenever David travels for work." Business associate? That's certainly what he claims with great authority and conviction. Art investments, gallery partnerships, exclusive cultural ventures, all very impressive sounding terminology that strikes me as completely suspicious. Eleanor gestured gracefully for Chen to enter the elegant foyer. That particular man possesses the kind of practiced, superficial charm that immediately sets off every alarm bell I've carefully developed during my 78 years of experience. Chen leaned forward with growing interest. "Can you provide more specific details about the nature of these visits?" "Always perfectly timed when David's away on extended business trips. Always involving hushed, secretive conversations conducted behind closed doors in Victoria's private study. Always concluding with Victoria appearing either absolutely ecstatic or completely terrified, never anything resembling normal human emotion." As if summoned by their detailed discussion, Marcus Thompson appeared dramatically in the doorway like an actor making a calculated stage entrance. Tall, expensively dressed in tailored Italian suits, displaying the practiced, predatory smile of a seasoned professional manipulator. "Ladies, I certainly hope I'm not interrupting any important police business," he said with smooth confidence, his tone suggesting mild amusement rather than genuine concern. Chen studied him with careful intensity, noting every detail of his appearance and demeanor. "Mr. Thompson, I'm investigating a serious theft that occurred yesterday. I understand you've been spending considerable time at this residence recently." "Purely business discussions with Victoria, nothing more complicated than that. We're currently exploring some absolutely fascinating opportunities in the art authentication and investment market. Quite financially lucrative ventures, actually." "Were you present at this house yesterday during the time frame when the alleged theft occurred?" "I stopped by briefly during the morning hours to discuss our latest potential venture." Victoria seemed quite excited about her elaborate evening entertainment plans. Eleanor's barely audible snort of derision carried volumes of unspoken skepticism and disapproval. After Marcus excused himself with calculated politeness, Chen noticed how his calculating gaze lingered appreciatively on the valuable artwork displayed throughout the mansion's public rooms. Professional interest in cultural objects, or something far more sinister and calculating? "Please tell me honestly about Victoria's current financial situation," Chen asked Eleanor with direct urgency once they were alone. The elderly woman's expression immediately grew grave and deeply concerned. "She's been hemorrhaging money at an absolutely alarming rate for many months now. Compulsive shopping sprees, high-stakes gambling sessions, extremely risky investments that David knows absolutely nothing about. The monthly credit card bills alone would completely shock and horrify you. Gambling activities. High-stakes poker games at private clubs, dangerous online betting platforms, exclusive casino nights with wealthy socialites. She believes she's successfully hidden these activities, but I personally handle all household financial accounts whenever David travels for business." Chen felt entirely new investigative possibilities emerging from this conversation. Has her general behavior changed noticeably recently? Increasingly desperate and reckless with each passing week. And desperate people consistently make extremely dangerous, life-altering choices that hurt innocent people. Detective Rivera sat across from Jonathan Hayes, the insurance investigator whose legendary reputation for uncovering sophisticated fraud schemes had earned him respect throughout law enforcement circles nationwide. Hayes methodically spread the detailed case files across the polished conference table with practiced efficiency. "The claimed monetary values are absolutely fascinating from a professional perspective," he said, pointing precisely to the jewelry photographs with his gold pen. "Mrs. Whitmore is adamantly insisting these pieces are collectively worth nearly $300,000. That figure seems extraordinarily excessive for personal jewelry," Rivera observed with growing suspicion. "Exactly my professional assessment. I've commissioned independent appraisals from 3 separate certified experts. The actual current market value totals closer to $75,000 maximum. Someone is deliberately inflating numbers significantly. Rivera studied the extensive documentation with renewed interest. Classic insurance fraud methodology. Absolutely textbook pattern. Stage a convincing theft scenario, dramatically inflate the claimed values, collect the substantial insurance payout, then mysteriously recover the pieces later through anonymous tips or convenient discoveries. Meanwhile, Dr. Patricia Adams was experiencing the most disturbing phone call of her distinguished academic career. Learning that her former colleague Amelia Washington faced theft accusations felt like discovering the entire world had somehow tilted completely off its moral axis. Detective Rivera, I understand you're investigating Amelia Washington for alleged theft. There's been a catastrophic mistake of enormous proportions. Dr. Adams, what's your professional connection to Mrs. Washington? She was one of our most distinguished and respected faculty members until devastating personal tragedy forced her temporary departure from academia. Amelia Washington holds a doctorate in art history with specialized expertise in jewelry authentication and historical valuation techniques. Rivera felt the investigative ground shift dramatically beneath the case. She's considered an expert in jewelry. One of the country's absolute leading authorities in the field. She's published extensively in peer-reviewed journals on gemstone authentication, historical jewelry techniques, and sophisticated fraud detection methodologies. If anyone could immediately spot truly valuable pieces versus professional replicas, it would definitely be Amelia. The staggering irony hit Rivera like a physical blow. The woman accused of stealing jewelry possessed more expertise to evaluate it than anyone else involved in the entire case. Dr. Adams, why exactly did she leave the university? Her husband's sudden tragic death, immediately followed by her mother's extended serious illness. Overwhelming medical bills completely consumed her life savings, and she desperately took whatever honest work she could find to survive financially. Rivera concluded the call with a completely transformed understanding of who Amelia Washington truly represented, not a desperate criminal, but a fallen scholar whose extensive expertise made her the least likely person to attempt such an obviously traceable theft. Victoria Whitmore stood rigid at her bedroom's tall windows, watching police patrol cars cruise her exclusive neighborhood like predatory sharks methodically circling wounded prey. The investigation was progressing far too slowly for her comfort, asking increasingly uncomfortable questions about financial secrets she desperately hoped to keep buried forever. Marcus Thompson lounged casually in her private study, his usually polished, charming demeanor now replaced by cold, calculating menace. The insurance investigator is getting dangerously close to the truth, Victoria. Hayes has built his entire reputation on systematically exposing sophisticated fraud schemes. I absolutely refuse to hear about problems right now, Victoria snapped with barely contained panic. I need practical solutions that actually work. The solution is elegantly simple, we immediately abort this entire plan. Return the jewelry discreetly, claim everything was simply misplaced during cleaning, and cut our losses before serious consequences develop. Victoria's face flushed bright crimson with overwhelming panic and rage. Absolutely not under any circumstances. I desperately need that insurance money immediately. The creditors are making serious threats to contact David directly. Then you should have carefully considered potential consequences before you started gambling recklessly with money you never actually possessed. The pointed mention of her devastating gambling debts made Victoria's stomach clench with familiar, nauseating dread. She'd completely lost control months ago, desperately chasing mounting losses with increasingly larger bets, secretly borrowing against valuable assets David knew absolutely nothing about. Marcus, we absolutely must make this scheme work perfectly. I simply cannot afford to lose everything I've spent years building. Everything you've built? Victoria, you've built absolutely nothing except crushing debt and dangerous delusions. Downstairs in the elegant living room, Eleanor Whitmore was conducting her own quiet, methodical investigation, having lived long enough to recognize unmistakable signs of a family teetering on the edge of complete crisis. She discovered Officer Chen waiting patiently in the marble foyer. I've been seriously thinking about our previous conversation, Eleanor said without any preliminary social pleasantries. Victoria has been lying systematically about far more than just missing jewelry. What exactly do you mean by that? Her constantly changing story about when she supposedly discovered the theft keeps shifting dramatically. First it was immediately after lunch, then mid-afternoon, now she's claiming it was early evening. Someone who genuinely discovered a real theft would remember exactly when it happened. Chen nodded grimly with growing understanding. What other inconsistencies have you observed? She's been secretly moving substantial amounts of money around, taking dangerous loans against the house without David's knowledge, quietly selling pieces of valuable art David inherited from his deceased father. That poor, innocent woman, Mrs. Washington, she's being deliberately framed for Victoria's increasingly desperate schemes. As if responding directly to their serious conversation, Victoria appeared dramatically at the top of the curved staircase, her carefully maintained composure visibly cracking under mounting pressure. "Why are you still conducting this investigation?" she demanded of Chen with obvious desperation. "I explained exactly what happened in complete detail. Why haven't you properly charged that woman with serious felony theft?" "Mrs. Whitmore, thorough investigations require time and careful examination of all available evidence." Evidence? She had complete access, obvious opportunity, and clear motive. What additional evidence could you possibly require? Eleanor shook her head sadly with profound disappointment. "Victoria, perhaps it's finally time to tell the complete truth before this situation gets significantly worse." The gentle suggestion struck Victoria like a devastating physical blow. The truth? I am the genuine victim here. I'm being systematically robbed by my own trusted employee. But even as the desperate words left her lips, Victoria knew her carefully constructed web of lies was beginning to collapse completely around her. Rebecca Martinez had been losing precious sleep for days, the haunting image of Amelia Washington's dignified suffering gnawing relentlessly at her guilty conscience. Finally, she decided to thoroughly review her comprehensive home security footage with painstaking attention to detail. Officer Chen arrived at Rebecca's modest home within 15 minutes of receiving her urgent, breathless phone call. "You mentioned discovering something critically important on your security camera system." "Yes, and I feel absolutely terrible for not checking this footage more carefully much sooner." Rebecca led Chen through her comfortable living room to her compact home office where multiple high-definition monitors displayed different strategic angles of her property. "Look carefully at this specific timestamp, yesterday at exactly 12:23 p.m. Rebecca pointed precisely to the monitor showing the Whitmore mansion's private back garden area. "Watch the rear service entrance very carefully." Chen leaned closer with growing excitement as a tall figure emerged from the mansion's service door, an expensively dressed man in a tailored business suit, moving swiftly and furtively toward the garden's rear exit gate. The digital timestamp clearly showed this was nearly 5 full hours before Victoria claimed to discover any theft. "Can you enhance this particular image for better clarity?" "I already did that immediately after spotting it." "That's definitely Marcus Thompson, Victoria's so-called business partner." Rebecca switched monitor angles with practiced efficiency. "Here's the most interesting part, watch very carefully what he's carrying." The enhanced high-definition footage clearly showed Thompson entering the mansion completely empty-handed at 11:45 a.m., then leaving at 12:23 p.m. with what appeared to be a small, dark velvet pouch carefully tucked inside his expensive jacket. Chen's pulse quickened with investigative excitement. "Mrs. Martinez, this footage could completely change our entire investigation. Can you create copies immediately?" Meanwhile, Eleanor Whitmore was conducting her own methodical investigation into Victoria's increasingly erratic recent behavior. Armed with decades of hard-earned experience reading people's lies and deceptions, she confronted her daughter-in-law directly in the private study. "Victoria, I believe it's finally time we discussed your serious gambling problem honestly." Victoria dropped the papers she was frantically shuffling. "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." "Don't you really? The casino receipts I discovered hidden in your designer purse, the threatening phone calls from aggressive creditors, the mysterious business meetings with Mr. Thompson? Eleanor moved closer with quiet authority. I know you're drowning in overwhelming debt. You had absolutely no right to go through my personal belongings. I had every right when you started secretly using household accounts to cover your mounting gambling losses. That innocent woman you're trying to destroy, she's completely innocent, isn't she? Victoria's carefully maintained facade finally began cracking under pressure. She's just a maid. A complete nobody. She's a human being with a doctorate in art history. I made several calls, Victoria. Did you know she's considered one of the country's leading experts in jewelry authentication? Victoria's face went completely ashen with shock. How could you possibly know that? Because unlike you, I actually care about truth and justice. Now, where is your jewelry, and what role is Marcus Thompson playing in this elaborate charade? Eleanor's voice carried the unshakable authority of age and accumulated wisdom. Tell me the complete truth immediately, or I'll tell David everything when he returns from his business trip. The direct threat of her husband's discovery pushed Victoria dangerously close to her breaking point. Detective Rivera's intensive background investigation into Marcus Thompson unveiled a sophisticated criminal history stretching across multiple states and countless victims. Thompson had perfected the art of targeting wealthy women with gambling addictions, systematically manipulating them into elaborate, high-stakes fraud schemes. Thompson's been successfully running this particular con for many years, Rivera explained to Officer Chun during their urgent briefing. He methodically identifies vulnerable targets with financial problems, offers them convincing fake business opportunities, then carefully manipulates them into insurance fraud to temporarily solve their mounting financial problems. Insurance investigator Jonathan Hayes joined their critical briefing with additional damning evidence. I've analyzed the jewelry photographs much more carefully with expert assistance. Several pieces clearly show recent replica work, professional-grade fakes designed specifically for sophisticated insurance fraud operations. So the real jewelry was never actually stolen from the house. Absolutely correct. My professional theory is that Thompson convinced Victoria to have expensive replicas made by skilled craftsmen, then they staged the theft to collect substantial insurance money while keeping the valuable originals safely hidden elsewhere. Chen produced Rebecca's clear security footage with obvious satisfaction. We have Thompson leaving the house with a concealed package exactly hours before the alleged theft. It's definitely time to bring him in for questioning. The arrest of Marcus Thompson at his luxurious downtown hotel suite was swift, decisive, and professionally executed. Faced with overwhelming video evidence and detailed witness testimony, Thompson's sophisticated, charming mask slipped dramatically within hours of intensive interrogation. All right, I'll cooperate fully with your investigation, he told his hastily summoned expensive lawyer. But you absolutely need to understand, Victoria Whitmore approached me about this scheme initially. She was facing complete financial ruin and social disgrace. So you suggested insurance fraud as a solution? She was already planning something similar. I just provided the necessary technical expertise and professional connections. The replica work, the precise timing, the perfect scapegoat selection. Detective Rivera leaned forward with intense focus. The perfect scapegoat being Mrs. Washington. Victoria's idea completely and entirely. She said a black domestic worker would be the absolutely perfect suspect, someone juries would automatically assume was guilty based on prejudice and stereotypes. The detailed confession continued for many hours, systematically revealing the full scope of their conspiracy. Victoria had accumulated over $400,000 in gambling debts across multiple casinos and dangerous online platforms. The jewelry insurance scam was carefully designed to provide enough money to clear her debts and start over. Where are the real pieces located now? Thompson's lawyer nodded permission to answer after brief consultation. Safety deposit box at Metropolitan Trust Bank downtown. Box number 1247, registered under the business name Empty Enterprises. As officers prepared to retrieve the critical evidence, Rivera felt both professional satisfaction and personal disgust. The case was solved conclusively, but the damage to Amelia Washington's reputation and dignity might require years to repair completely. What happens to Victoria Whitmore now? Chen asked with obvious concern. She's next on our arrest list. Time to face serious consequences for her choices. The truth was finally emerging, but the cost had been enormous for an innocent woman whose only crime was being convenient to blame. Dr. Patricia Adams sat in the police station's comfortable family conference room, her academic heart breaking profoundly for her former colleague's devastating ordeal. The transformation from respected university professor to accused criminal was a modern tragedy that revealed society's deepest, most persistent prejudices. Amelia, I cannot adequately express how deeply sorry I am, Patricia said, grasping her friend's hands with genuine emotion. This terrible injustice should never have happened to anyone, especially someone of your character and qualifications. I understood the risks when I accepted the job, Amelia replied with quiet dignity. The moment I saw the hatred and contempt in Victoria's eyes, I knew how vulnerable I was. People like her don't see people like me as fully human beings. Detective Rivera approached their table with visible relief and professional embarrassment. Dr. Washington, I owe you a profound and sincere apology. You've been completely exonerated. Marcus Thompson has confessed to orchestrating the entire fraud scheme. Amelia's tense shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. And Mrs. Whitmore's involvement? Being arrested this afternoon. The charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, perjury, and insurance fraud. She faces significant prison time. Dr. Adams stood up with academic determination, her mind already working on comprehensive solutions. Detective, I need you to understand something crucial about Amelia. She's not just innocent, she's one of the most qualified jewelry experts in the entire country. Rivera nodded with growing understanding. We've learned about her impressive credentials. Dr. Washington, I must ask, when you worked in that house daily, did you notice anything suspicious about the jewelry? Amelia was quiet for several long moments, carefully choosing her words. I observed several pieces that seemed inconsistent with their alleged age and historical provenance. The metalwork on some items appeared too pristine for genuine antiques. The setting techniques were completely wrong for the claimed periods. But commenting would have been. Would have been what exactly? Completely inappropriate for someone in my position. Domestic workers don't question their employer's possessions, regardless of their expertise or qualifications. The bitter truth of her statement highlighted the systematic inequalities that had silenced her authoritative voice despite her extensive qualifications. Patricia leaned forward with urgent intensity. Amelia, the university has been waiting for your return. Your position has been held open, and we're prepared to offer you a full professorship with comprehensive research funding. Patricia, I can't afford to return to academia. Full salary retroactive to when you left, comprehensive benefits package, and substantial funding for your own authentication laboratory. The university owes you this opportunity and much more. For the first time since the ordeal began, Amelia's composed exterior broke completely, tears of relief and gratitude flowing freely down her cheeks. I thought my academic career was over forever. Never, Patricia said with absolute conviction. You're Professor Washington, and it's time the world recognized your true value and contributions. As they prepared to leave the station, Detective Rivera approached once more. Dr. Washington, I hope you'll consider consulting with our department on art fraud cases. Your expertise could help prevent others from being victimized. Amelia nodded slowly, her dignity returning like a familiar, comfortable garment. I'd be honored to help, Detective. Perhaps some good can come from this experience. The nightmare was ending, but the lessons learned would last forever. Justice had prevailed, but only after an innocent woman had endured the worst kind of persecution simply for being convenient to blame. The arrest of Victoria Whitmore unfolded with dramatic, inevitable justice. Detective Rivera and Officer Chen arrived at the mansion to find Victoria locked desperately in her private study, frantically burning papers in the ornate fireplace while Eleanor Whitmore waited calmly in the elegant marble foyer. She's been destroying evidence for the past hour, Eleanor informed them with sad resignation and profound disappointment. Though I suspect she's overlooked quite a bit in her panic. Victoria's voice shrieked hysterically from behind the heavy oak door, "You're all conspiring against me. That woman corrupted my business partner, turned him against me with her lies. Mrs. Whitmore, we have a valid warrant for your arrest. Open this door immediately," Rivera commanded with authority. When they forced entry, Victoria presented a pathetic, desperate spectacle. Her expensive silk blouse was stained with ash, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears of rage and mounting desperation. The woman who had lorded her perceived superiority over others now trembled behind her antique mahogany desk. "This is all Marcus Thompson's fault," she wailed dramatically. "He manipulated me, exploited my trust. I'm as much a victim as anyone else in this situation." Chen approached with handcuffs ready. "Victoria Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, filing false police reports, perjury, and criminal defamation." "Defamation? I was protecting my property." "That woman, Dr. Amelia Washington," Rivera interrupted coldly, "is a distinguished academic whom you attempted to frame because you believed her race and employment status made her a convenient target." As they escorted Victoria out in handcuffs, her husband David returned from his business trip to find media crews and police vehicles surrounding his home. His confusion and horror were genuine as Eleanor gently explained the devastating truth. "Victoria has destroyed everything we built together," David said, his voice hollow with betrayal. "How could she sacrifice an innocent person to cover her gambling addiction?" "Because she lost sight of basic human decency," Eleanor replied sorrowfully. "She saw only what confirmed her prejudices, believed only what served her selfish needs." Victoria's bail hearing transformed into a public spectacle covered by every major news outlet. Her attorney pleaded desperately for mercy, citing emotional distress and manipulation by Thompson. But Judge Harrison remained completely unmoved by her theatrical tears. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've committed serious felonies while attempting to destroy an innocent woman's life through racial prejudice and class discrimination. This court finds your actions reprehensible. Bail is denied pending trial." Victoria's carefully constructed world crumbled completely and irreversibly. Her assets faced immediate government seizure, her social circle expelled her in disgust, and media coverage portrayed her as the epitome of entitled corruption and racial prejudice. Alone in her cold jail cell, Victoria finally confronted the magnitude of her crimes. The Maid she dismissed possessed expertise that dwarfed her own knowledge. The community she tried to impress now regarded her with universal contempt and disgust. "I need to confess everything," she whispered to her lawyer the following morning. "I want to tell them the complete truth." The confession lasted 6 hours, revealing every detail of the scheme, her gambling addiction, and her deliberate choice to frame Amelia based purely on racial prejudice. Victoria's fall from social grace to convicted felon was complete, but justice demanded nothing less. News of Amelia Washington's complete vindication swept through the community like a cleansing storm, carrying with it profound shame and urgent calls for reflection. The Tribune's front-page headline read, "The Scholar We Failed to See," accompanied by Amelia's university portrait and details of the injustice she'd endured. Dr. Patricia Adams moved swiftly to restore Amelia's rightful place in academia. The university's emergency board meeting lasted 6 hours, resulting in unanimous approval for Amelia's reinstatement with full honors and significant compensation for her suffering. "Ladies and gentlemen," the university president announced to a packed auditorium, "we proudly welcome back Dr. Amelia Washington as our new distinguished professor of art history and director of the Center for Cultural Authentication." Amelia approached the podium with quiet grace, her voice steady and clear. "I accept this honor not only for myself, but for every person who has been diminished by assumptions, overlooked because of circumstances, or silenced by prejudice masquerading as propriety." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but the most profound moment came when Eleanor Whitmore appeared backstage afterward. "Dr. Washington, no apology can undo what my family has done to you," Eleanor said, her elderly voice heavy with remorse. We nearly destroyed an irreplaceable treasure through ignorance and bigotry. Mrs. Whitmore, you weren't part of Victoria's scheme. But I enabled it through my silence. I witnessed her condescension, her casual cruelty, and I failed to speak up. That makes me complicit. Eleanor extended a sealed envelope. This establishes the Washington Foundation for Educational Justice, $200,000 to support scholars who, like you, deserve recognition regardless of their circumstances. Amelia's composure finally cracked. Mrs. Whitmore, this is overwhelming. It's overdue justice. Your brilliance should have been celebrated, not hidden in service to my daughter-in-law's prejudices. The community's response proved equally transformative. Rebecca Martinez organized a neighborhood unity gathering where dozens apologized for their silence. The Metropolitan Museum offered Amelia a prestigious consulting role. The police department requested her expertise in developing bias training programs. What strikes me most profoundly, Dr. Adams reflected as they toured Amelia's new laboratory, is that Victoria Whitmore employed one of the world's foremost jewelry experts and never realized her extraordinary fortune. Prejudice creates blindness, Amelia replied thoughtfully. She saw only what confirmed her assumptions, missing the very expertise she desperately needed. Students and faculty created a pathway of honor as Professor Washington entered her new office, finally home where she belonged. The nightmare was over, but the lessons learned would transform how the institution approached diversity and recognition forever. 8 months later, Dr. Amelia Washington stood in her corner office overlooking the campus quad, surrounded by her published research, international awards, and photographs from symposiums worldwide. She had reclaimed not just her career, but her rightful place as a leader in her field. Detective Rivera knocked softly before entering. Dr. Washington, I hope I'm not disturbing important work. Please, come in, Detective. How did the trials conclude? Thompson received 10 years for conspiracy and fraud. Victoria was sentenced to 6 years, though she'll likely serve 4 with good behavior. Her full confession helped reduce her sentence. Amelia nodded thoughtfully. And the Whitmore family? David filed for divorce and has been working to rebuild his reputation through community service. Eleanor continues funding education programs and criminal justice reform initiatives. She's remarkable. Her courage in pursuing truth made all the difference. Rivera leaned forward. Dr. Washington, I must ask, how do you find peace after such injustice? After they nearly destroyed your life? Amelia gazed out at students crossing the quad below. Detective, bitterness and hatred consume the person carrying them. I choose to focus on education, justice, and ensuring others never endure what I experienced. That's why our bias training program has been so transformative. Officers are learning to examine their assumptions before acting on them. That's the most critical work we can do. Change one mind at a time, one heart at a time. After Rivera departed, Amelia resumed reviewing applications when another visitor appeared. Professor Washington. I'm Marcus Johnson, a scholarship recipient. Amelia smiled warmly. Marcus. Please sit. Tell me about your research goals. I want to study how cultural artifacts reveal hidden histories of marginalized communities. Your story inspired me to pursue this field despite people saying it wasn't practical for someone from my background. Someone from your background? A kid from foster care who should be grateful for any opportunity, even if it means staying silent about inequality. Amelia recognized herself in this young man's determination. Marcus, never let anyone convince you that your perspective isn't valuable. Scholarship has always been a tool for justice, and researchers like us have a duty to wield it responsibly. As Marcus left with renewed purpose, Amelia reflected on the journey from accusation to vindication. Her phone chimed with a message from Dr. Adams. Your authentication work just helped recover stolen artifacts worth millions. You're transforming the field. Amelia smiled, watching sunset paint the campus golden. Sometimes the greatest victories emerged from the deepest injustices, and sometimes the most important lessons came from the most painful experiences. She was Professor Washington once more, but more importantly, she was exactly who she was always meant to be. Dear friend, this compelling story serves as a powerful reminder that we must never judge people by their current circumstances or make assumptions based on appearances and social status. Every person has a unique story, hidden talents, and inherent dignity that deserves our respect and recognition. In our daily interactions, let's challenge our unconscious biases and look beyond surface impressions. The person cleaning your office might be a former CEO, your server could be a published author, and your caregiver might hold advanced degrees. Everyone deserves fair treatment, the benefit of the doubt, and basic human dignity. True justice requires us to seek truth with open minds rather than rush to judgment based on prejudice. Let's create a society where people are valued for their character and contributions, not stereotyped by their circumstances.